Well, I didn't think I'd be talking about Ohio and Slava again after how many videos I've made on these two ships, but let's be honest, 10.0 has changed the power rankings of these different ships from the Research Bureau, and I think a lot of people are wondering which one they should get now that the meta has become so passive. And honestly, it's hard to say. I think they're both incredibly strong ships now. Before, as most of you know, I would have said Ohio 100%. Always get Ohio first because it's just a better ship. But now that the meta has shifted to this much more passive, campy playstyle, I'm finding a lot more people are willing to just sail broadside just at longer ranges. And my main criticism of Slava before was that it just sucks versus angled ships. And that hasn't changed, it's just that people are sailing broadside more because they're sitting at longer ranges. So they think they're safer at these longer ranges, which is not true when you're facing a Slava. Or in Ohio, for that matter. The ship kind of hits really, really, really hard when people give you broadside. But yeah, Slava's gotten a lot better this patch. A lot better. And if you're someone who's not interested in this pushy, brawly playstyle and you want to be more of the support battleship, I will recommend Slava over the Ohio. But for now, I want to talk about two games that I had. Back to back, actually. Ohio first and then Slava. And really, I think this is a perfect set of games to show you the strengths of the two ships. Both of them are over 200k, so I had a couple of really, really, really strong games here. And Ohio's strengths definitely are in its close combat capabilities still. It's not bad at range, but these secondaries are still the most accurate secondaries in the game, even if they're a little bit less accurate than they were before. Basically, they're just less good against destroyers and cruisers. They still hit battleships quite often. But your main guns on this ship are 457s that are incredibly accurate, and they deal a ton of damage. That's the main advantage these guns have over the Slava, is that they deal way more alpha in doing 15,750 versus Slava doing 12,100. It's a large difference. And at the same time, these guns overmatch 30 millimeters, which is everywhere at tier 10 on cruisers. So against angled ships, Ohio's going to be much better. It also has a better reload, and it has better armor. Slava has a 25 millimeter upper bow and stern, so you're going to be overmatched by basically every battleship at the tier. And at the same time, Ohio also has better heals. As we all know, they reload every 40 seconds. You can see I just used my heal. There it is, 35 seconds and it'll be back up. That's one of the strongest parts of this ship. This ship also has way better turret traverse, and it's probably a bit better in the mid-range, I would say. Slava's no slouch in the mid-range at that like 15-kilometer range, but I would still probably take an Ohio over a Slava, because the real strength of the Slava is outside 15 kilometers, I would say, is really when the Slava gets strong, where its accuracy is better than its competition. At closer ranges, Slava has worse accuracy than other battleships at the same tier. It still has better accuracy at close range than it does at long range. It's just that the way the slope of that dispersion drop off as you get to longer ranges is far shallower, so it eventually becomes the similar dispersion as battleships around that 10-kilometer area, and then at longer ranges it retains its accuracy far better at long range. So if you find you're never really able to push in all that much, I think Slava will be a better choice, because these guns, as you can see, one of the downsides is the slow shell velocity. So if you're not used to aiming shells at longer ranges, this ship might be tricky to get used to. Only 8 guns and really long shell travel times out to 20 kilometers is not the easiest thing to use. So if you're someone who just wants to be able to have lasers to shoot at to make things a little bit easier to aim, I think Slava would be a great choice for you. Personally, though, I do find Ohio to be more fun because I do enjoy these pushing, brawling moments. I think this is where the game is at its most fun, in my opinion. And that's why I personally will pick an Ohio over a Slava. It's not to say Slava's not fun. It is pretty fun devastating striking people, right? Hitting people for massive amounts of damage, but every battleship can do that when things are broadside. Slava can just do it a little bit more consistently at long ranges. But it's not to say Ohio can't either. You see, we already have 6 Citadels this game. A pretty great result, I would have to say. And the biggest reason this ship is a good pick for me is that I find people often are angling, kiting away like this Nevsky is. And with our big giant shells, we can overmatch him basically everywhere. Whereas a Slava would be bouncing off the deck armor. Sure, the Slava would be overmatching the side armor as well, but the deck armor would bounce it. You're going to find there's a lot of 30mm armor that your Slava's going to bounce off of. So Slava does rely on those broadsides, and it's very good at killing those broadside ships, but you're not always going to get them. Whereas Ohio is better in more situations, I think. But that's not to say Slava is bad in closer ranges, and it's not to say it's bad when you have to tank a little bit either. But it's just not as good as the Ohio at these kind of things. But you'll notice immediately a ship 23 kilometers away, and look at that shell velocity and grouping. It's very consistent, and that's one of the nice things about this ship. You can see even the HE can deal reasonable damage at these longer ranges. Don't count out Slava HE. Sure, the alpha might be low, and so is the fire chance, but you hit a lot of your shells on battleships at longer ranges. So if you're facing an angled Kremlin, for example, it might be a good option to switch to HE. But let's be honest, broadsides is what you're looking for, and that's what you're trying to get. And that's when you should be using the AP. Everything about these guns is great in their performance and penetration, that kind of thing, their shell flight time. The problem is the alpha. We just hit 7 shells there for 14k damage on a broadside Bismarck. It's a little underwhelming sometimes. It's something you're going to have to get used to with the Slava is you're going to hit more shells for less damage on most ships, unless you're getting Citadels, which hopefully you're getting Citadels more often because of the consistency on these guns, but it's still a battleship at the end of the day, and you have to remember that even with a supposedly RNG-proof battleship, there's still RNG involved in these things, so you're never really truly going to get away from salvos that just kind of bracket the target, like that Petro. No hits. It happens, so don't think that this ship will give you perfect salvos every time. That's not the case. It's still a battleship, and it does suffer with dispersion sometimes because of that. But it's a very, very, very strong ship when people give you broadside. Even with losing a turret, that kind of thing. It's just the consistency is basically what you're playing this ship for. You're giving up armor, you're giving up alpha damage, you're giving up reload to get these guns that more often than not are going to hit the Citadel or where you're aiming. Something to note of the AA, the Slava actually has better AA than the Ohio does. Ohio has decent AA, but Slava gets essentially pre-nerf Kremlin AA, where Kremlin, as we all know, had really strong AA when it came into the game, and the community complained that the ship was too tanky, so as a nerf, they decided to make it vulnerable to carriers. And the way they did that is they made the AA mounts have 0 HP, so any HE shell that comes and hits the superstructure area is going to knock out a bunch of the AA. So that's kind of the issue with Kremlin, but Slava doesn't suffer from that. So your AA mounts do survive HE hits. You're not going to survive a bunch of Thunderer hits, but a reasonable number of HE hits you can definitely manage to deal with. And that's a really nice thing about this ship over the Ohio or the Kremlin. It has 6.6 kilometer AA range, and that's really nice. But you're going to find that you're often playing like this. You're trying to find these cross-map shots on broadside ships. You'll notice that the enemy team is all angled towards my team north of C. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to catch their broadsides by being on the other side of the map, trying to find areas where enemy ships are going to be giving me broadsides. That's the playstyle of Slava. You're not pushing necessarily, you're trying to position yourself in ways to catch these broadsides, because it does pretty solid against these broadsides, and not very good against angled ships. That's the problem with Slava, and I think that's one of the more frustrating parts of playing this ship, is you have to deal with all of these angled ships, and then when you finally do get someone who goes broadside, you expect massive damage because you've given up so much in your ability to kill ships that are angled, that you expect huge hits when people are broadside, and then you don't get these massive hits when people are broadside, and it can be a little bit disappointing. Like that, again, a Bismarck broadside, only 14k damage, which, it's good damage, but with all of the sacrifices you've made to get these accurate guns, you would think it would do more to broadside sometimes. But when you do get that perfect dispersion, it is really, really, really satisfying. Not many ships can compete with the dispersion that this ship can give. Sometimes. Just like that. That's the salvos that I'm sure you've seen where people say this ship is overpowered. And fair enough, right? Like, if everybody sails flat broadside and you get the best dispersion possible, yeah, the ship's a bit overpowered. But people don't just sit broadside in a game. And the instant anybody angles to you a little bit, your shell damage goes down dramatically. And in fact, the instant you don't get citadels, your damage goes down a lot too, because you don't have very high alpha damage. So you're relying on hitting citadels more often than other battleships. But when ships are giving broadside and you're able to citadel them in a Slava, well, you're able to citadel them in other battleships too. So I just want to say that the Slava is very good this patch, but don't expect it to be, if you don't have it already, don't expect it to be this all-out AP threat monster at any angle, at any range. That's just not how it plays. But that said, it is better this patch. Deadeye has helped the consistency of this ship a lot. And that's why, in my mind, it's a better choice than it was before last patch. Before last patch, it wasn't, in my mind, as worth it. Partially because Deadeye has helped it a little bit, but also because people are more likely to sit at the back of the map, and when they're sitting farther back, people think they're safer, and they're more likely to give broadside. So, with seeing more broadsides, the Slava gets better. The more broadsides you see, the better it is. The more angled ships you see, the worse it gets. Pretty simple. Whereas Ohio, it does well against angled ships because it has the big enough guns to deal with that kind of armor, whether you're overmatching it or because the shells are a little bit slower, you can actually land a bunch of full pens into superstructures. The speed of these shells actually comes as a disadvantage in that case, where the shells can just pass right through the superstructure, basically only dealing overpen damage to a lot of superstructures on ships. Whereas slower shells tend to sit within the superstructure that they've penned, and they're more likely to give you that full pen damage. So that's kind of the problems with Slava, but it's a very good ship this patch. And if you're someone who's not as interested in brawling, maybe give it a shot. I think you'd probably like it over Ohio, because brawling is hard these days. It is very, very difficult, especially at tier 10. That game I showed you with the Ohio, I got lucky. Not facing a CV, destroyers not really being present on my flank that's to stop me from pushing, no cruiser sitting behind an island or in a smoke just spamming me with AG. I got the perfect opportunity to push there, and that's not what every Ohio game is going to look like. Oftentimes you're going to end up sniping in an Ohio, and it's okay at that, especially if you know how to aim, but you're going to enjoy a Slava much more at longer range than you will an Ohio, just because the shell velocity is way, way better on the Slava compared to Ohio. And in fact, Ohio shell velocity, even though it has the same caliber of gun as the Vermont retains its shell velocity for longer. And that's why if you have both the Vermont and the Ohio, you're going to hit more shells and you're going to lead better with the Vermont because it's just easier, because the shells have way better shell velocity. Ohio's not easy at long range, whereas Slava is. It's a lot easier to play at longer ranges. So that's kind of the thought about the Slava and the Ohio. I like both these ships this patch. They're both really strong. Ohio did receive a nerf with its secondary accuracy, and with just how people are playing now, it's less likely to get into those brawling situations. You have to be far more intelligent with island usage and where to push and when to push. But I like both these ships. I think they're both really strong options for a Research Bureau. And I think they're probably the two ships you should get first. Colbert is fun. If you're not a Battleship player, Colbert is a fun DPM style ship to play. High risk, high reward type of thing. And Paulo Emilio, I don't have, but some of my friends do, and they have a blast in it, and it looks like a ton of fun to play. So if you're more of a DD player, that would be a great option. Like I said in my Siegfried video, I don't recommend that thing at all. If you're looking at a Siegfried, just go get the Ohio or the Slava. There's really no point in getting a Siegfried in my mind. Because these two ships are just good. They're very strong ships, whereas Siegfried is not. That's kind of my thoughts on the Research Bureau really quickly. I still don't like the way it's set up, forcing you to replay old content. But the ships in there, some of them are worth it. And Slava definitely fits the worth it bill now. I don't think it did last patch, but now it definitely is worth your time grinding for, I think. But so is Ohio. So it's a hard choice. Basically, if you like brawling, get the Ohio. If you're not really into brawling, get the Slava. That's my thoughts on it. If you're looking for a more competitive ship, I don't know which one will be used more. Ohio has definitely seen its role in competitive. And the problem with Slava is that it doesn't really do good damage against angled targets, which probably means it's not amazing in competitive. So it's hard to say. We'll see what happens next Kings of the Sea. So for those of you wondering how I have my ships set up, I'll just go over it really quickly. This is very similar to the build I have in my Georgia and my Massachusetts. I'm sure you guys have seen it already, but this is the full 21-point commander. I finally got it, and it does involve secondaries. This is the best way I've found to make use of secondaries while also being a good ship at longer ranges. I find Deadeye to just be very, very strong and required on basically every battleship. And that also includes Ohio, because the guns do hit very hard, as you saw. And then this is how I have the upgrade set up as well. And I am running a spotting aircraft at the moment, because you do sometimes need more than the 21.6 kilometers of range that it gets. Now for Slava, this is how I have it set up right now. You can definitely run range mod if you want to. Getting those like CV snipes in or cross mapping type of stuff, you can definitely do that with a Slava. So getting that range mod is an option, but for now I'm running reload, concealment. Prop mod is very nice for dodging shells. You don't really want to be tanking in this ship just because of the really, 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 really bad armor. Just look at this whole bow, 25 millimeters. The deck is 32, meaning all HE and Yamatos will overmatch this. It's just not good. So you'd rather not eat shells. So propulsion mod helps you to deal with that and dodge with that. And then this is how I have my commander set up for the Slava. Instead of taking secondaries, you'll notice I'm taking Emergency Repair Expert. This is mainly because this commander is also for my Kremlin. Just getting that extra damage control is very nice. And I'm nearly at 21 points. Once I get it, I'll probably get basic survivability. That's the plan, at least, for now. And yeah, that's how I have these two ships set up. I like them both, and I think they're both worthy choices to get out of Research Bureau now. And mainly down to the meta shifting to favor Slava a bit more, but I just find Ohio that little bit more fun to play in those scenarios where the ship actually works out. So thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.